and I'm bringing on our education guru. I call him Dr. Elwood. Elwood, how are you today?
I am fine, Sheryl. How are you? It's a pleasure to be with you.
I am glad to have you on as we talk about education here at the Diva Talk Radio Show. I cannot tell you how much I believe that education is the great equalizer. And as soon as we start to take education seriously, things will change for all people. So, you heard some of what Hill was saying, and it seems as though as a country sometimes we are just far more interested in sending people to prison than we are educating people, especially when we know it costs far less to send a student to Harvard than it does to send them to prison. Elwood, what are your thoughts on that?
Sheryl, that's a challenge that we face in higher education for a long time. As you know, I've been in this business for over 30 years now, trying to provide quality education for everybody. And I agree with you, particularly looking at our black men. I've been working on a story, a piece that I hope is going to come out in the next month or so, looking at educating African-American males. And it is indeed a major problem for us, as you just mentioned, and what Hill has talked about, the whole idea of prison system and incarceration. It appears that we are more interested in providing that for African-American males than we are for having them go to college. Very quickly, I'll tell our listeners, I really got involved in this, looking at the work of Hill Harper and what he's done and looking at some other people. There was a story recently that came out of UCLA, Sheryl. You may have seen this back in November, where the African-American students talked about there were more championships at UCLA than there were African-American freshmen. Now, this got the attention of a lot of people in this country, including myself. Can you imagine that?
Let me tell you something. It's just amazing because sometimes I look at these numbers and I say, are we systematically being shut out of the best education there is? I mean, I listened to Hill earlier and he said it seems as though we are bent on just undereducating some people.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Sheryl. It appears that certainly we're not putting the resources and we're not putting our dollars into educating particularly African-American males, but also minority populations in general.
Period. I don't care if they are Indians on the reservation. I don't care if they are the first-generation Americans of immigrants. Anytime you start to put culture, color, class on education, it becomes a problem.
It really becomes a problem because we all know, all of us in this business understand that education is the engine of opportunity. And if folks aren't educated, they're not going to have the opportunity to get a good job. They're not going to have an opportunity to provide for their family. They're not going to have an opportunity to get involved in businesses and entrepreneurship. Their opportunities are not going to be there if they don't have an education.
Absolutely. And, I pay so much attention to what I see in the media, what I see in pictures, what I see in advertising. And it was interesting. They were talking about, I think it was a class of, it was the cover of Time magazine, and they put up a picture of the graduating class of the future. I don't know whether it was the class of 2015 or 2025, but when I looked at that picture, I looked at the images that they chose to include in the future of the higher educated. Darkly missing was young men of color.
Absolutely.
They were just not in the picture.
Yeah, and it speaks to what is happening all across the country. I think that piece that the young man did for UCLA, that's not unique to UCLA. That's all around this country. That's all of our elite institutions around this country have somewhere from about 1% to 2% African-American male population. And so when we talk about
and when they mention that 2%, they want you to feel good about that 2%.
Yeah, and we can't feel good about that. We can't feel good about those numbers, but there's another part of the equation, Sheryl, that we're missing. Not only are African-American males not going to school, but those that do go aren't completing their education. So we have a serious problem with retention. And that speaks back to our higher education systems and the kind of support structures that we need to provide for our African-American males to make sure that they're successful. So it's about access, it's about getting them there, but it's about creating an opportunity for them to be successful once they get there.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's very interesting. So often we get set up to get there, but like you just said, we're not set up to graduate. Students get frustrated. Teachers don't complete the courses. You find that sometimes you get to school and it's not exactly what you thought it was. They don't understand how to put together those core classes. Sometimes they come in, they don't take the what do you call those preparation classes?
Yes,
they have very often, and it's I don't know. I get frustrated because I want some answers.
And I think that we all do. And I think one of the things that we try to provide at any institution is when you have students to come there, you want to make sure that you have the kind of support structures that are consistent with those individuals' worldview. As you're aware, I'm provost at Cambridge College. And at Cambridge College, we have a mixture of both international students. We have a very diverse population. And so we have to make sure that students come, that we have what they need in order to be successful. And it's like Sheryl, it's like being at your home. When you invite someone into your home, you invite them with the understanding that you're going to make them feel welcome. And what I think, Sheryl, is that higher education systems have not made our young African-American males feel welcome.
You are so absolutely right. I was listening to a group of young men speak the other day, and they go to a private, one of those great schools on the East Coast, and in this particular school, they were welcoming a large group of Chinese students. Mm-hmm. The young men said that the Chinese students not only have their own house, they have their own supermarket, they have their own classes to learn the English language. And he said, I'm from this country, I live here, and no one's ever done anything like that for me. And he said it was interesting because one of them went so far as to say, I can't even bring a black fraternity to myself. Wow.
Yeah,
that's
Sheryl,
a major statement.
Sheryl, those are great observations from your conversation with the Chinese students. Take you back to the students at UCLA. The students there said the way they were able to survive is they made some connections with their own community. They got involved in organizations that spoke to who they were. And so that goes back to having that support system, that support structure, because when you go to a place, particularly in higher education, it's extremely difficult. And in order to manage that, you have to feel welcome, and you have to have the kind of support structures that are necessary for you to be successful. And I think that's the missing element to making sure that we educate our African-American males. They get to these universities and colleges, and all of a sudden they don't see anything that reflects themselves and their own identity.
That is the truth. And you know what? The same thing goes for any other young man of color. It goes for that young brown man. It goes for that young Indian off of the reservation. It goes for children, first-generation Americans. It's, if you don't have that support, if you don't have it in your home, if you don't have it in your community, if you don't have it in your own heart and mind to make this happen, it's just not going to happen. I say this all the time, Elwood. They are not sending any boats for you. Ain't nobody coming. And if you're looking for a helping hand, you better look at the end of your own arm.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of do it yourself, and that's the kind of commitment that you have to have as an individual, that you're going to make it no matter what. I think there are two parts of it that you just mentioned. I think the colleges and universities have an obligation to make sure that they provide what's necessary, but I also think on the other end, the student also has the responsibility to make sure that they seek out these kinds of situations, but also the understanding that it is going to be very difficult coming into a new environment. So that,
right.
I think we have to bring both parts of those equations together. That own internal drive and motivation that we hope that you get from your parents and you get from folks who are trying to nurture and support you as you began your education very early on. And so if you have those roots and if you have that core value, core mission of being successful, I want folks to grab onto that as well. I want our students to say, I'm going to succeed in spite of that. But I think we also have an obligation to make sure that we provide the support that's necessary as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. We hear the saying all the time, it takes a village, and truly it takes a village. And far too often we see sometimes that certain villages are not looking out for other people. And I have to say it that sometimes, people talk about diversity, and often you see that people don't start looking out for the needs of other people until it starts hitting home with them, like, when it affects their paycheck, whether these students come in and do well. Are we really paying attention to them? Are we graduating them properly? Are we preparing them for success? Are we just setting them up for failure? Yeah,
and these are all questions, Sheryl. You're absolutely right. These are all questions that the higher education community has to ask itself, doing the kinds of things that you just mentioned. Are you providing the kind of environment for all students to be successful, yes, or are you setting them up for failure? Are you educating them and giving them the kind of content, the kind of experiences, the kinds of internships that are necessary for them to be successful across the board? And if we start there, it's easy for us to begin to break down the various groups and say we certainly want to do it for all and everyone, but are there special needs that international students need? Are there special needs that first-generation college students need? Are there special needs that women need who oftentimes we tell not to go into science and medicine? So we have to look at all segments of our population in providing the kind of education that's necessary for them to be successful in this world.
And we appreciate you for understanding that. So, our Czar of Education, Dr. Elwood, tell people what's going on at your college.
We are ready now to begin looking at bringing in some new international students. We're also, Sheryl, beginning our first look at providing online education to the adult learner. I spent Friday and Saturday talking to groups of adult students. Remember, at Cambridge College, we are educating the adult learner, and so we're trying to provide opportunities for them to come back to school and to get their degrees, and providing the kinds of platforms, whether that's in-seat, whether that's weekend, whether that's online, where they can continue working and then providing for their families and at the same time receive a high-quality education.
And we love you all for that. And I thank you so much for coming on and giving us these words of advice when it comes to education, because like I keep saying, education is the great equalizer. And there at Cambridge College, there is no late time. It doesn't matter if you're grown and you're thinking that you need to finish your education. They are right there for you. How can people get in touch with the college?
You can get in touch with the college by going to our website. That's cambridgecollege.edu. You can get in touch with the college by always, Sheryl, you know, you and I, we believe in social media. By contacting me via Facebook, via Twitter, I'm always providing information about higher education. I'm always providing information about the college. And so you can always get in touch with me or the college and find out more about Cambridge College.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for joining us here on Divinely Inspired, Victoriously Awesome Diva Talk Radio.